Welcome to our deep dive, and we're going to be looking into cow cuddling today.
Oh, very nice.
But we're going beyond just like the cute videos and the, headlines
Yeah.
and really trying to understand what's happening at Libby Lou's Safe Haven for Cows.
Okay.
That's in San Diego,
Yep.
County, California.
Yeah.
And we've got a couple articles about animal assistive therapy.
Mhm.
We also have a podcast episode where the founder, Lori, was interviewed.
Okay, cool.
So I'm really excited to kind of get into it.
Yeah.
I want to know about not just the feel-good stuff, but also like the science behind it
Right.
and some of the bigger implications too.
Yeah, I think it's a great example of something that seems really simple, like cuddling with a cow.
Right.
But it actually touches on some really complex topics like animal cognition
Mm.
and emotional well-being,
Yeah.
ethics of animal agriculture,
Wow.
even climate change.
Yeah.
It's really
It's
interesting.
a lot to unpack.
Yeah, it is.
And I think Lori's story is a really powerful place to kind of start.
Okay.
Because, she didn't just set out to create a cow cuddling empire or anything.
Right.
Libby Lou started because she was dealing with some really profound grief
Oh, wow.
after she lost both of her parents.
That's awful.
And so I think what's interesting is that even though this is like her own personal experience,
Yeah.
it actually reflects a growing amount of research about how beneficial it is to interact with animals.
That's really cool.
Yeah, there are studies that have shown that spending time with animals can actually lower your cortisol levels,
Mm-hmm.
which that's the stress hormone.
Right.
And it can increase oxytocin, which is
Yeah.
sometimes called the love hormone,
Yeah.
because it makes you feel more bonded and connected.
Interesting.
So it's not just like a, feel good in the moment kind of thing.
Right.
There could be actual changes happening in your brain.
Yeah, exactly. And those changes can actually help with your resilience and healing.
Okay, so there are like neurochemical changes that are happening.
Yeah, and it goes way beyond anecdotal evidence, too. Researchers are looking at how these interactions with animals can rewire our brains over time
Wow.
and create a lasting positive effect on mental and emotional health.
That's really amazing.
It is.
It makes me think about the whole field of animal-assisted therapy,
Right.
which uses animals as a complement to traditional therapies.
Exactly.
So is cow cuddling being taken seriously in those circles?
It's still relatively new compared to equine therapy with horses
Right.
or, therapy dogs.
Mm.
But there's definitely a growing interest in the unique benefits that cows might offer.
Okay.
Some therapists believe that their size and gentle nature can be really grounding,
Yeah.
especially for people who've experienced trauma.
I can see that.
Yeah,
So there's potential for like real therapeutic value.
definitely.
But I have to admit, the idea of cows as therapy animals is still kind of blowing my mind.
I know.
I mean, are they really that intelligent and
Yeah.
emotionally complex?
Yeah, it's funny because for a long time, cows were considered to be pretty simple creatures.
Really?
But new research is challenging those assumptions.
Interesting.
Like studies have shown that cows can actually recognize human faces.
Wow.
They can remember people who've been kind to them,
Really?
and they can even learn to solve puzzles to get food.
That's so cool.
It is.
So they're not just, reacting instinctively or whatever.
Yeah.
They're thinking things through.
Yeah.
They're problem solving.
Exactly.
What about their emotional lives?
Right.
Like, do we know anything about that?
There's evidence that they experience a range of emotions from, joy and affection to fear and anxiety.
Interesting.
They form strong bonds within their herds,
You okay?
and they even display behaviors that look like grief
Oh, wow.
when a member of their group dies.
That's really powerful.
It is.
It makes you think about how much we've been misunderstanding them
Yeah, it really does.
for all this time.
And it raises some serious ethical questions about how we treat them,
Right.
especially in industrialized agriculture.
Yeah, because you see this image of, a cow at a sanctuary interacting peacefully with a human.
Right.
And it's such a contrast to what happens in factory farms.
Exactly. And that's something that Lori is very vocal about.
Okay.
She sees Libby Lou's as a way to not only give a safe place to these rescued cows,
Mm-hmm.
but also to challenge people's ideas about them
Okay.
and encourage everyone to have a more compassionate approach to animal welfare in general.
So it's not just about offering people a feel-good experience.
Right.
It's about advocating for a different way of relating to cows
Exactly.
and then all animals by extension.
It ties into a broader movement toward recognizing that animals are sentient beings
Okay.
and advocating for their rights.
That's a big conversation.
It is.
And it makes me think about all those cute videos online
Yeah.
of people cuddling with cows.
hmm
Is that really what happens at Libby Lou's, or is it more complicated than that?
That's a good question. Lori emphasizes that while cuddling is definitely a possibility,
Okay.
it's not the main focus.
Okay.
The cows are always given the option to choose how they want to interact.
Oh, okay.
Some might enjoy being brushed or petted,
Yeah.
while others might prefer to just watch from a distance.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's about respecting their boundaries.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's a powerful message.
I agree.
It really challenges us to see them as individuals with
Mhm.
their own needs
Yeah.
and preferences.
Instead of objects just for us to, use for entertainment.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's interesting to think about how those interactions, even if they're short,
Right.
might affect the visitors.
Yeah.
The sanctuary's website has testimonials
Oh, cool.
from people who talk about feeling at peace and connected
Mm-hmm.
and even emotionally healed
Wow.
after spending time with the cows.
That's amazing.
And that's where the research about animal-assisted therapy kind of comes in. Studies show that interacting with animals can reduce your stress, anxiety, and even symptoms of PTSD.
It's not a magic cure,
Right.
but it can be a really helpful complement to therapy.
And I would imagine being in nature,
Yeah.
surrounded by these, gentle giants,
Mm-hmm.
would make you think about things.
Yeah, definitely. It can help people re-examine their relationships with animals,
Okay.
their food choices,
Yeah.
and their overall impact on the world.
It's like a smaller version of that bigger conversation we're having
Exactly.
about sustainable living
Mhm.
and ethical consumption.
Right. And while not everyone who visits will, immediately become vegan
All right.
or a radical environmentalist,
Of course.
it plants these seeds of awareness
Yeah.
and inspires them to at least think about making more mindful choices.
So it's not about preaching.
Right.
It's about creating a space
Yeah.
where people can connect and reflect
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and maybe transform a little.
Exactly. And those personal changes
Yeah.
can then spread outward to their families,
Mhm.
their communities,
Yeah.
and ultimately to society as a whole.
I like that.
It's a nice thought.
But from a practical standpoint, how does a place like this stay afloat?
That's a good question.
You got all his mouth to feed.
Right.
Jet bills.
It must cost a fortune.
It can't be cheap.
No, it's definitely a labor of love
Yeah.
and a constant fundraising challenge.
I bet.
Lori has said that they really rely on donations, both money and supplies.
Okay.
People can sponsor a cow,
Ah.
donate hay or other things they need, or even volunteer their time.
That's nice.
That is.
So it's the community that
Yeah.
really makes this possible.
Exactly.
People believe in what they're doing
Mm-hmm.
and contribute how they can.
And it's not just financial support either.
Okay.
It's about getting the word out, sharing those stories
Yeah.
of the rescued cows,
Okay.
and really advocating for a more compassionate way to approach animal welfare.
And that can take many forms.
Talking to family and friends about factory farming,
Right.
choosing plant-based foods,
Yeah.
or even supporting laws that protect animals.
Exactly. It all comes back to that idea of interconnectedness.
Right.
The choices we make have a ripple effect. Even small actions can make a difference.
I like that.
Yeah.
So we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
We went from Lori's personal journey
Mm-hmm.
to cow intelligence,
Yeah.
to ethics and agriculture,
Right.
and even seaweed and methane.
It's amazing how many things are connected to cow cuddling.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to learn more about what actually happens when you visit Libby Lou's
Me too.
and how those experiences make a lasting impact
Absolutely.
for both the people visiting
Mhm.
and the sanctuary itself.
Yeah, we'll get into all of that in the next part of our deep dive.
Can't wait.
Me neither. So we know now that there's more to cow cuddling than what it seems like on the surface.
Right.
But I want to know, what happens when you actually go to Libby Lou's?
Okay, good question. What's a visit like?
So their website says it's a really well-structured experience
Okay.
that's meant to be both educational and therapeutic.
Interesting.
And it starts with a tour where Lori introduces everyone to the residents.
Okay.
It's kind of like Cow 101.
I like it.
You learn about their personalities,
Cool.
their history,
Yeah.
and, all that fascinating stuff about the social dynamics of a herd.
Right, all that hierarchy stuff we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. And then you get to the hands-on part
Oh, fun.
where you can brush the cows,
Yeah.
pet them, and interact with them.
That sounds really nice.
But they really emphasize respecting their boundaries.
Of course.
Some cows like Doe might be super excited to see you.
Yeah.
Don't want to be petted.
Right.
But others might need you to be a little more gentle and approach them slowly.
That makes sense.
It's that focus on letting the cows choose how they want to interact
Right.
that makes this so different from a petting zoo.
Yeah, you're right.
It's about meeting the cows on their own terms,
I like.
letting them decide how much interaction they're comfortable with.
And that's an important message, too.
It is.
It challenges us to see these animals as individuals,
Right.
not just things for us to use however we want.
Exactly. It's like we were saying earlier about seeing them as sentient beings.
Yeah, with their own needs and wants.
And it's interesting to think about how even a brief interaction with a cow could affect the visitors.
I would think it would be a very calming experience.
Well, the sanctuary's website has all these testimonials from people
Oh, really?
who talk about feeling super peaceful and connected, and even like they experience some emotional healing.
Wow, that's incredible.
And that's where all that research on animal-assisted therapy comes in.
Right, because studies show that interacting with animals can lower your stress and anxiety.
Yeah, and even help with things like PTSD.
It's amazing how powerful that connection can be.
It really is. And I bet just being in that environment,
Yeah.
surrounded by nature and these big, gentle animals,
Right.
could help you reflect on things.
Definitely, it might make people rethink their relationship with animals or think about their food choices or just like their impact on the world in general.
Right. So it's kind of like a smaller version of that bigger conversation
Exactly.
about sustainability and ethical consumption.
And even though, not everyone who visits Libby Lou's is going to become vegan right away
Of course not.
or turn into some kind of eco-warrior,
Right.
it at least makes them more aware of these issues.
Yeah, it plants the seeds for change.
Exactly. And it encourages them to be more mindful of their choices.
So it's not about telling people what to do or how to live.
No, it's about giving them a space
Right.
to connect with these animals and reflect on their own lives.
And hopefully that leads to some kind of personal transformation.
Right. And those individual changes can then spread to other people,
Exactly.
like family members and friends.
It's like a ripple effect.
And eventually, maybe even to society as a whole.
That's a beautiful thought.
It is, but I mean, running a sanctuary can't be cheap.
I know.
So how do they actually keep the lights on?
It's a good question. Because feeding all those cows and paying the vet bills,
Right. It must cost a fortune.
yeah, it's not cheap.
So how do they do it?
Well, Lori has talked about how important donations are.
Okay.
They rely on both money and supplies from people who support their mission.
Makes sense.
So people can sponsor a cow if they want.
Oh, that's sweet.
They can donate hay and other things from their wish list,
Okay.
or they can volunteer their time at the sanctuary.
That's great.
It's really the community
Yeah.
that makes this whole thing possible.
That's amazing.
People believe in what Libby Lou's is doing, and they give what they can to support it.
And it's not just about the money, though.
Right.
It's about spreading awareness, too.
Yeah.
Telling those stories of the rescued cows.
Okay.
And advocating for a more compassionate approach to animal welfare.
And that could look like a lot of different things.
It can.
Like talking to your friends and family about factory farming, or choosing plant-based options when you're grocery shopping, or even supporting laws that protect animals.
Exactly. And it all goes back to that idea of interconnectedness we've been talking about.
I agree.
The choices we make have consequences.
They do.
And even small actions can contribute to positive change.
So even if you don't live near a cow sanctuary,
Right.
what are some of the main things people can take away from this deep dive?
I think the biggest takeaway is that our relationships with animals are way more complex than we think.
Yeah.
They're capable of intelligence and emotions and social connections in ways that we're only just starting to understand.
And that realization should change how we treat them.
Definitely, both on an individual level and as a society.
Right. We can't just keep seeing animals as commodities.
Exactly. We need to recognize that they have value in and of themselves.
So maybe that means making different choices about what we eat,
Right.
or supporting organizations that are fighting for animal welfare, or even just taking the time to really appreciate the animals in our own lives.
Those are all great ideas. And even those small acts of kindness and awareness can make a difference.
Exactly.
It's about cultivating that sense of empathy and respect for all living beings.
I love that.
Yeah.
It brings us right back to Lori's story.
It does.
Her own journey of healing led to this incredible sanctuary.
Right.
And now it's inspiring other people
Yeah.
to connect with cows and rethink how they see the animal kingdom.
It's a really powerful example of how one person can make a difference.
It really is.
Yeah.
So what's next in our deep dive?
Right.
We've looked at the personal stories, the science,
Yeah.
the ethical questions.
That's the feel-good stuff.
What else is there to consider?
Well, we talked a little about the environmental impact of cows.
Right.
But there's a lot more to explore there.
Okay.
So next, let's look at the research on sustainable farming.
Yep.
The whole debate about methane and how sanctuaries like Libby Lou's can help us create a more environmentally friendly future.
Sounds good to me. Okay, so we've talked about the emotional side of things
Yeah.
and the ethical questions, but now I want to get into the environmental impact.
Okay, yeah, it's a big one.
There are a lot of different opinions out there.
Definitely. And cows kind of get a bad rap, you know?
Like they're the poster child
Exactly.
for all the negative environmental impact,
Of animal agriculture.
especially when it comes to greenhouse gases.
Yeah, you always hear about how cow farts are going to destroy the planet.
Right. But is it really that straightforward?
Well, it's true that cows produce methane as part of their digestion.
Okay.
And methane is a powerful greenhouse gas.
Right.
And livestock farming around the world does contribute a lot of methane to the atmosphere.
But you mentioned earlier that there's research on ways to reduce these emissions.
Yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff happening in that area.
Okay, so it's not just about blaming the cows.
No, it's about finding solutions.
I like that.
Yeah.
So what are some of the most promising strategies?
Well, one thing we talked about before is changing their diet.
Right.
Studies have shown that adding red seaweed to their feed can really cut down on methane.
Interesting.
And scientists are also working on feed additives
Okay.
that can stop the growth of those microbes in their gut.
The ones that produce methane.
Exactly. So it's kind of like making them less gassy.
I see.
And there are also efforts to improve how we deal with manure.
Oh,
Instead of letting it decompose in those open lagoons.
which releases methane.
Right, farmers can use anaerobic digesters.
What are those?
Basically, they capture the methane
Okay.
and turn it into biogas,
Wow.
which can then be used as renewable energy.
So you're taking a problem and making it into a solution.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
It's a really good example of how we can use innovation to create a more sustainable system.
Yeah, and there's also that whole movement toward regenerative grazing,
Right.
where they use livestock,
To mimic how wild herbivores would graze naturally.
and that can help store carbon in the soil.
Exactly, making it a climate-positive solution.
So maybe it's not about getting rid of cows completely,
Right.
but finding ways to include them in a more sustainable system.
I think that's the key, and that's where places like Libby can really make a difference.
How so?
They can be like testing grounds for these new practices,
Okay.
showing how we can care for animals and be good stewards of the environment at the same time.
Yeah, I like that.
It's like a small-scale model for what could be done on a much larger scale.
And when people see that it's possible
Yeah.
to treat animals with respect and still have a sustainable system,
You can really open their eyes.
yeah, it might inspire them to make different choices in their own lives.
Exactly, like supporting local farmers who are using sustainable practices,
Right.
maybe eating less meat, or even advocating for policies that protect animals and the environment.
It all goes back to that idea that everything's connected.
It does. Our choices have consequences,
They really do.
but we have the power to make a difference
To create a better world for everyone.
for humans and animals.
I think this deep dive has really given us a lot to think about.
It has.
It's amazing how something as simple as cow cuddling can lead to so many insights.
It is.
So to wrap things up,
Okay.
I want to leave our listeners with a few key takeaways.
Sounds good.
First, don't underestimate the power of connecting with animals.
It's truly amazing
It can bring healing and joy,
and teach us so much.
and challenge your assumptions about animals.
Yeah, they're capable of so much more than we often realize.
And finally, remember that our choices matter.
They do.
So let's try to make choices that align with our values
Absolutely.
and help create a more compassionate and sustainable future.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that's all the time we have for today.
Okay.
But keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those cow cuddles coming.
I'm definitely going to try.